Okay, hi. It's Tuesday, a little afternoon here on the East Coast. A quick video to just wrap up week 6 and to introduce us into week 7, which actually has lots of stuff in it. So, week 6, it was a thin week, but the point was that uh, cash is king, i.e., if you can't pay your bills on times, no matter how profitable you are over an extended period of time, you can't stay in business, right? So cash is king. And I added a little case study to the week to give our discussion maybe a little more substance. And I appreciate that, Dawn, you gave it a shot at reading and responding to my post. And I'll say that I added in the second discussion forum an Excel spreadsheet that devises a cash analysis of the CTC nonprofit, its revenues versus its expenses by month over like an 18-month period. And it is rough, obviously, because the case study is not that detailed, but it is based on the budgets of the case study and the narrative that talks about when revenues are actually received from the federal and state contracts. And based upon that information, you can piece together a projected cash flow over the coming 18 months and see that the CTC is going to have probably a perpetual cash flow problem or uh, a loan requirement of about $200,000 simply because of the size of the contracts, the typical lag between when they incur expenses in operating the federal and state programs and when they actually get the money from the state and the federal government to cover those expenses. There's always a lag there of 2 or 3 months, sometimes longer at the end of the year. Hence, they're always going to be paying expenses but getting the revenues at a later date. Hence, they're always going to have a cash flow need. Okay, and the sort of analysis that's in the case study, or rather in the Excel spreadsheet, is something that your nonprofit or any nonprofit should be doing on a regular basis, particularly when it is thinking about expanding. Because as you get a bigger operation, typically your cash flow problem or need for bridge loans or line of credit commensurately expand as you are expanding your organization. Okay, so it's just an example of the type of a very simple analysis that any nonprofit really should be doing. Okay, okay, so this week is kind of I was going to say schizophrenic, but just to say that the initial PowerPoint PowerPoint lecture of the week seems to focus on budgets, and yet your reading focuses on financial statements. So I'll just make a comment about the lecture. Clearly, it's focused on budgets and the budget process, and in layman's term, budgets are simply a plan for putting your money where your mouth is, right? It's the allocation of your financial resources, hopefully that reflect your priorities. And the tricky thing in a nonprofit organization is that you have a lot of stakeholders, right? And they don't always agree on what your priorities are, or the ordering of those priorities, or on the means on how to get to agreed upon ends. And so they have So there's obviously a political aspect to budget formulation because each of those stakeholders are trying to influence how the financial resources are being allocated to reflect their own thinking. And so the budget process, as I think I mentioned in an earlier week in an earlier video, is political, and your lecturer this week acknowledges that, and Rubin talks about that in the article that the lecturer is discussing. And I think I referred you to Reframing Organizations by Bowman and Deal and their section on politics. But at any rate, just understand, right, that there is a technical aspect to budgeting, which is getting all the numbers estimated correctly and putting them in the right little boxes on the budget sheet. But the process by which the final decision making is made, or the final decisions are made as to how you're going to allocate your resources, is definitely a political one. And your nonprofit organization needs to have a legitimate or a process that is seen by the stakeholders as being legitimate for arriving at those decisions. Otherwise, you get a lot of dissension and a lot of festering that goes on because people didn't get the money that they wanted, and or they think the process for making those decisions wasn't a fair one. It leads to a lot of festering and hard feelings. Okay, so that's the budget part, and the lecturer does a good job of talking about that. The readings this week talk about the financial statements, the three financial statements: statement of financial position, which talks about your wealth. Are you rich or are you poor? The second one is the statement of activities, which talks about your profitability. Are your revenues greater than your expenses during a given period of time? And then the third statement has to do with cash flow, and essentially how do you use your cash during the year, and implicitly then is it adequate? Is your cash amount adequate to pay your expenses on time? We also then talk about ratios, and that's in both of your readings this week. They talk about financial ratios, and the point here is that yes, financial statements report all the facts and figures about your organization, but can you analyze those reports, and can you glean from them information that tells a story about the financial strengths and weaknesses of a particular organization? And it is by using ratios that you can better understand the information contained in the statements. And so the ratios hopefully help you do three things. One is to better understand the relative wealth of your organization, or the organization you're looking at. Are its assets really greater than its liabilities? And on balance, is there more things that you own than that you owe? Right? The second set of ratios have to do with the profitability of the organization, and that has to do with your sustainability, right? If you continually are unprofitable, well then after a while your wealth will be all used up in covering those losses, and you'll be out of business because you won't have any wealth left, and you'll be losing money all the time. So that has to do with the profitability. And then lastly, there's some cash flow, and there's some cash flow analysis and related to liquidity again. Okay, so those are three general areas. Let's see, I think I had another note here. Yeah, the ratios have to do with wealth, profitability, efficiency. You'll see there are a number of efficiency ratios there as well. Okay, I'm going to add to this week's readings a couple of Excel spreadsheets that are basically cheat sheets to help you understand what each of the financial statements contain. I hope they're useful. I will say that if you have any feedback as to whether this additional information I'm adding to the course is useful, not useful, that would be really helpful to me. In part, I'm adding the information because I have it, and other students I've taught before have found it useful. But I've I've taught at different schools. I've never taught at A&M. I don't know if the information is useful to you guys, or whether it's just not useful. So just let me know so I can know what to do as we go forward. Add more of this extra stuff, or not waste your time putting it in there. Okay? All right. Well, thanks. I'm at 11 million minutes, and I'll see you online. Thanks.